in the conversation. Neeta Kolhatkar, she's a senior independent journalist with over 30 years of experience. She has won Mayor's Award for Excellence in Journalism in 2008, a Peace Fellow and TED Talk speaker. She's a co-founder of the Report Live YouTube channel covering Mumbai City. Welcome, Neeta. I'm really looking forward, and as you heard, many of us are really looking forward for this amazing conversation today, where we are going to understand the ecosystems organizations have to create a bias-free environment for women. So go ahead.
Thanks, Smita. Welcome, everybody. Happy Women's Day. I hope from 2022 we are more inclusive with all kinds of women who are amidst us in our society. While we celebrate a small reality test, and that is why this discussion today, basically, are we building bias-free ecosystems? Do we have the kind of infrastructure to address them? We have with us very accomplished people. There is Smita, who is the co-founder of KelpHR. KelpHR is working towards providing a very inclusive and making the environment, supporting women and making it a happy working environment. Mahabanoo Mody Kotwal, very renowned theatre personality, producer, writer, director, actor across various platforms. She has produced, written, directed plays, films, TV series, acted, and she brought us the vagina monologues. So that is very important. Pratibha Girish, she is the founder of Finwise Personal Finances Solutions. She helps clients to achieve their financial needs. Oh yes, we need to hear that. And we have none less than Advocate Ashok GV. He's the partner at Factum Law and practices at the Karnataka High Court. So we have a very, very wide spectrum of speakers with us. I will start with basically Pratibha. When we speak of finances, there is always a stereotyping, okay, that you have a woman with a washing tub in her hand, piles of clothes, and children around, running around, and she has to look at food, things on the gas, the washing machine. And it's the man who plans for her, the finances. Why is this still there? Why are women not the planners for their own finances, but the man? So the man can be first the father or the father-in-law or the husband, but not her.
So very true, so very true. We come across so many customers. Many of these women are earning, they're earning substantially, so many times even better than the man, but they tend to outsource their needs for personal finance to the male member. Like you said, sometimes it's a husband, sometimes it's a son, but it's always outsourced. And sometimes when you put in the effort to involve them, sometimes the men do a tick mark activity, they're just there and they're not expected to contribute. And many times, very surprisingly, the women themselves take a back seat. I wonder why it is. And when you probe further, you see that they have some role models in their mind. If they have a previous generation, if they have a mother, who has not been very involved, sometimes I think it's imbibed in them that this is something which needs to be outsourced. And I cannot take active.
I'll stop you here. Don't they see the fathers in the family?
They do, but they've just segregated it, I guess, gender wise. And when you actually come to it, that when they're pushed against a wall, I've come across many women who are widowed, divorced. Okay, in such situations, it takes them hardly any time to master it. They take active interest in it and they do so well and they're regretful. They're saying, why didn't I do it earlier? I didn't have to wait for such a situation. Why didn't I take interest earlier? Many times, despite being encouraged, they didn't bother to take interest in it. So,
do you think it is the family and the society pressure that works like this towards putting the women themselves in, these?
Yeah, into a box? Yes, I do think so. Unfortunately, there are a few women where the family is encouraging them, but they don't come forward and take take initiative. But majority of the women, they are they're made to feel like you cannot understand the money. I can do it better, so why don't you let it be? And sometimes when they do come up with suggestions which are very smart, I must say, are kind of subdued and snubbed in a very, very mild way, and
True.
that actually pushes them backwards. So next time they think 3 times before coming out with even a suggestion.
When we speak of financial empowerment, now what you're saying, the suggestion and all, it's also ironical that the same women whose husbands are taking care of the finances will ensure that their cook or their maid, housemaid, for them, they start an independent bank account so that they invest. Why is when a woman shows a certain financial independence, it's seen with suspicion and it's seen as a betrayal?
Yeah, I think this, it is, it's come down generations, and it's people want to change. Like I was, the family groups, men who write very, quite upset about it, saying that women today are not taking active part in their finances. And I know these very men, they don't take their wives into consideration at all when they're taking a, huge decision like buying a house or investing. They don't take the, they don't take the opinion of the woman in their lives, and they want their daughters to be financially savvy. It doesn't happen like that. If you want your daughter to be financially savvy, one should set an example. If it's happened for so many years, I think it's time for us to wake up and make a difference. Also, when women come to us, and sometimes when I'm talking finances, they are very busy serving me with bhajia pakoda or some barfi. Some women do that, and I tell them, listen, if you don't take interest, you're setting a very wrong example for your daughter. She will follow in your footsteps. Do you want that? And it really makes a difference, because nobody wants that the same the daughters follow in the footsteps and are dependent on somebody else for the finances.
How do you think we can encourage not just women, but break this stereotype for men? Because often we see men are investing on behalf of women because it is financially, business-wise suitable, tax saving opportunity for the men. So how can we break this?
Number one, I'm saying if women cannot take decision, it does not matter. You're allowed to outsource to somebody else, but you cannot be clueless. You need to be aware of what's happening. Whether you work, whether you don't work, it doesn't matter. You need to understand the family finances. I think you can ask in whichever way that suits you. You can ask aggressively, you can be mild, you can do whatever, but you need to know what's happening to the family finances, what investments you have, what insurances you have. That's a starting point. Once a woman finds out, what situation she is in, she puts an effort. I've seen in all these workshops which we conduct, when we conduct a workshop with men and women, men come back, they take care of their personal finances. Women always come back and tell me, can you do a workshop for my children? I didn't know, my sister-in-law, they're trying to empower, they're trying to enlarge the circles. Can we do another one for my set of friends and stuff like that? So once they at least understand their situation, understand their estate laws, understand where they stand in finances, I think that's a starting point, that can make a difference. And you can't always wait that somebody will invite you to to be part of the discussion. Sometimes you need to grab the opportunity, sometimes firmly, sometimes very mildly, but one needs to grab the opportunity and say, no, I want to understand. Doesn't matter, I'll not contribute now, but let me at least be part of every single discussion. And they start contributing. In 1 or 2 years, people who make the effort are actually they grow by leaps and bounds, because they put in solid effort to learn from from all this, and they call you not in a group, but they call you to ask questions which they think are very silly or stupid questions.
Thank you, Pratibha. Mahabanoo, we are talking of stereotypes, and oh wow, I'll come to the stereotypes. But this city, Bombay, Mumbai, is still the city of dreams for thousands of people. They want to fulfill their dream of being models, actors. be it theater, film industry, and do you think there are sufficient social and basic infrastructure in place to protect them? Because we know how what happens. How do you think the situation is in the first place, and can there be opportunities to correct it?
Of course, there are opportunities, but unfortunately, they are not given. And yes, hundreds of girls and young men land up in Bombay, I believe, on a daily basis to make it to Bollywood or theatre. I don't think many of them come here for theatre, because theatre is certainly one of the poorest cousins of the arts. You don't get paid much in theatre, and it takes a lot of grit and serious work, to put up a play. However, for a film, of course, it requires work, but the work is distributed. You have the light boys, you have the spot boys, you have the writer, you have the director, you have the producer. So the work is sort of, well spread out. Whereas in theater, you have just a director and a producer. And normally the big companies never encourage theatre. They will give 50 lakhs or a crore of rupees to put up a fashion show where models in overpriced and undersized dresses walk the ramp. But they will not give a good 20 lakhs for a good play. And a good play needs more than 20 lakhs. If you go to Broadway or to the West End, you'll see, I did a play in London where the budget was £250,000. So there is nothing like that here. There is no government support. There is absolutely nothing. There are no good training centers for writers. I mean, there are a few handful of good female writers, a good handful of good female directors, but they're not enough, because in a country with a population like ours, the women are not represented well at all. And once they come in here and they start going into Bollywood, it's a whole different ball game, of course. Many of them are exploited. Many of them have no places to stay, so they don't get homes because nobody rents out to a single woman. I don't know why that is. I don't know what they expect the single women to be doing. And even if they are doing whatever it is they're doing it within the four walls of their house. As long as they're not disturbing anyone, it's okay. I mean, the other day I read something very shocking, that women and men barged into a tenant's house because she was wearing shorts and beat her up and beat up her friends. I mean, how stupidly ignorant and regressive can you get? So these mindsets need to change. But I don't think mindsets will be changed very easily by the stuff that is touted out on television. Every woman has to be a Sita, every woman has to be a Gita, and she has to be worshipped, but she has to be beaten also. And the whole situation is quite horrific, frankly, according to me.
Speaking of stereotypes, we see that the women are always shown as very attractive. Even if it is a detergent powder or water, they have to look like they're selling sex. This continues even in 2020, whether it's India or everywhere, more so here, because even if it is a pesticide for farmers, they spray and they are getting affected. But just because there is a sultry looking woman, especially a model, people want to, it influences their purchasing pattern. So is there a way to break this?
Well, of course there is. The idea is not to do the things that we are doing. India sells everything through sex. They sell a washing machine through sex. If there's a washing machine, you see a half-clad woman standing there. It's just objectifying the woman. And yet Indians will not sit down with their sons and daughters and have a sane, rational conversation about sex. And this is the horrific scenario that is really playing havoc with women's lives in India.
When we speak of theatre films, they wield a very strong influence. And do you think this sort of, we do see good films. Yes, now at least they are funding them. But when we speak of, like you said, serious plays, it's so expensive. Even the audience, do you think they don't want something which is serious? They don't want something which is real?
Well, I think that if you give a product that is good to the audience, people always say, oh, we give the audiences what they want. And that is why these television serials get away with the rubbish that they are touting out to day in and day out to women. The idea of superstition, where Kala Tika Lagao, every serial has a wedding scene in which the bride's mother puts a Kala Tika on the daughter-in-law or the daughter. And every time something happens, it is Meri Shapat le, or swear on me that this happens, or swear on God that this is true. These things, after all, you must realize that the Indian masses, they are not very educated. Let's face it, they are not very educated. And you keep giving them this drivel day in and day out. You can't get away with it. You are influencing their minds. I tell you how you can influence, how much you can influence. I did a serial many years ago. It was quite okay, And one day we were asked to go to Calcutta to promote the serial and to inaugurate a shopping mall. And I tell you, I who am not at all well known, the way people ran after me and said, "Arey, Maji aa gayi, Maji aa." They were literally tearing at my hands and my clothes. And I was shocked. I said, if this is the power television has, we are misusing it, certainly misusing it. And I put the blame squarely on the television directors, producers, whoever. You see one good serial, that's not enough. It's not enough to educate the masses. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mahabanoo. I'll come back to you all, you and Pratibha soon. Smita, I would like to speak to you. You have been doing a lot of work with the women, especially in the corporate sector. And when we speak of corporates, they seem to be facing a dichotomy. You don't want to ask personal questions. Should you not at the time of the interviews. And at the same time, we do agree to one thing, that women need support on special occasions, special times. There may be crisis in the personal life, there may be crisis in the domestic life. So where do you find a kind of a balance in this? How can they work around this?
Sure, amazing question. And first of all, you will be surprised that we are even talking about it, because a lot of people push me back saying that why can't we ask personal questions when we are interviewing people, right? We have to ask them whether they are married, what is their spouse doing, how many children they have, what is their schedule. I'm like, why would you need that? You have to hire the person, right? So I remember when we were hiring, actually, Ankita is online and she gave me this feedback. Smita, when you hired me, you asked me questions only related to my job. You did not ask me what my husband is doing or how many kids. So I was like taken aback. That made me realize, yes, I did not and I do not, right? And in KelpHR, it's a very clear culture that we are not going to do this. And this is what we've been promoting clearly over a period of time. Now, great question you asked, Neeta, is that how do you strike a balance? You have to infuse that confidence within every person that your manager is happy to listen to you if you have a concern. Have you created an ecosystem where person can confide into you and say that I will need these kind of support? What kind of aura or ecosystem are you creating? So this is a very thin line that you will have to tread, or balance you'll have to maintain or create or work towards, right? And it will happen over a period of time. It will happen through the ecosystem. It won't be one person driving it or coming only from the top. It has to be in the DNA of every organization, right? They have to speak the right language. They have to create the credibility in the system. They have to create an ecosystem where people can reach out to. So there is a lot of work, Meeta, slowly and steadily, step by step, needs to be done.
Because the point is, often what happens when you share something, you never know how it comes back to you and how it comes back to haunt you. Because often they ask you questions like, even simple things like, are you married, your religion, your caste, do you have HIV, have you done this test? And people have in certain categories, like I said, we need to get inclusive. And in the sense of pushing inclusivity, this happens. Have you ever got these sort of cases where people have shared in goodwill and it's come back to haunt them?
Yes, yes, it has. I mean, many a times people share, I sit on various sexual harassment committees as well, right?
Yes.
And latest case that I'm handling, so the conversation, single woman sharing her personal conversation with one very senior person, and the senior person thinking that he can give a shoulder to her, like trying to take advantage. Yes, it happens, and it happens very rampantly. So to whom you give that information is important. And I really challenge that organization of having such senior people, right? If you have pests in the organization, the pests show up quickly and they show up in difficult situations. So put them in difficult situation and evaluate them. Interviewing is not a great skill of identifying right kind of person. Put them in difficult situation and see how they react to. And if they react differently, then you know that that person is the right kind of a fit or a wrong kind of fit. Yes, people get taken advantage if they share, but then as an employee, you should be able to understand with whom you can share. So I won't say it is only the other person's responsibility, it is also your responsibility. You cannot be chalta firta bar, right? You have to ensure to whom do you share your personal stuff, to whom you can confide, and not necessarily that if you share it with same sex, you will be more safer, right? So I have had my bestest friends were men in corporate. I had a greatest camaraderie with all the men friends that I had. So it depends. So you as a person need to have that, gut feeling, if I have to say, or a strong judgment where you can share and cannot share.
Speaking of sexual harassment in corporates, A, it's not encouraged to call out. B, often the victim has to prove her innocence. And is there still a mindset in the Indian corporates where they can address these sort of issues, especially sexual harassment at workplace?
Oh yeah, Neeta, I've been working for like 10 plus years. The law came in only 8 years back in 2013 for our country. But we have been working in the space of Vishakha guidelines. And so let me give you a precursor. Our country lives in at least 4 centuries. So we are living to 2022, but I know a set of people who live in 1922 and 1822 also, right? So if I'm speaking purely, and I'm an urban woman, I'm speaking purely from tier 1, tier 2 kind of cities. There are evolved organizations, right? But as I have said that, I also know organizations which are still in 1922, okay, which has a big question mark of how sexual harassment can be detailed. But organizations which we work with, 700 plus organizations, pan-India, 99.9% want to create the safest space for everybody, not only women, men also, because men also get harassed and third gender also gets harassed, right? So they are constantly working towards it. And there is amazing IC committee, internal committee, which is an autonomous body. It does not report to anybody in the organization. It is created by the people for the people, but again, very credible people of the organization form that committee, and that committee infuses confidence in people to go and report and have the conversation. So they only not work till the cases come in, but they also work for prevention and prohibition. So it's a continuous journey. So again, this is 2022. Now there are organizations which are not there. Maybe that's a very large conversation to have.
When we speak of inclusivity, because this means not just typical females, they're all sorts. So we have women, we have trans, we have lesbians. And in the corporate sector, when we say that, inclusivity has to be there, do you think it's mistaken that it's to fill in these slots or meritocracy? So why isn't there this, that yes, you are giving emphasis to merit and it's not either or?
So it's a chicken and egg story, absolutely, okay? whether we should give preference to meritocracy or should we give preference to diversity. Now, we will have to balance the both, right? We need our jobs to be done, and we also need to give an extra hand to people who come from this community. So this community has been marginalized. Let's take it on face, right? Especially transgenders and people who come from lesbian, gay, they are still in closets, right? If you look at the statistics, 11% of people fall in LGBT community. But how many in your organization have come out? Question mark, right? Many do not come out because they feel that they will be bullied or harassed if they come out. So do we have to start talking about it? Yes, we have to start talking about it. We have to say that we will be creating, or we are creating, a safe workplace. Should we be hiring from that space? Yes, we should be hiring. So we will have to give special. So, we discuss about a word called equity. You know what is equity? Equity is not equality. It's a different, right? Equality, that you have 10 chocolates and you divide 2 chocolates among five people, that is equality. But equity is that if somebody is super hungry, who has not eaten for 5 days, you might give that person 5 chocolates out of 10 and distribute 2 to somebody, 1 to somebody, and 1 to somebody. So that is equity. So these marginalized community, or community which needs to be given more focus, will be needed to be given that kind of support, and we should be giving that support. So we'll have to balance that equation. It's a very thin balance, and we'll have to see how we work about it. At KelpHR, we support a lot of organizations to create that balance constantly.
Speaking of creating balance, we also need very good policies and law in place. Ashok, hi. We've come a long way as women, though Maharashtra has been one of the leading states where policies for women are concerned. But when we still speak of, policies, and we are speaking of laws, can we say that, especially, let's start with the sexual harassment cases. Often it's still the victim who has to prove her innocence. That is one. And connected to it is the fear, because when a woman calls out, the accused invariably gets away easily, it's seen, and more so the victim faces defamation cases in many leading corporate. I can even tell you, sadly, it is happening in the media also. So what is the situation, and this kind of a scenario, what are the health and infrastructure available? Not
Ashok, can't hear you, Ashok.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
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 So what I was saying was the entire concept of human rights jurisprudence, which is the foundation of almost everything that we're discussing today about equity and equality of opportunities. One of the most sacred rules of human rights jurisprudence is that there is a presumption of innocence. So the burden will always be on the accuser, which in more often than not is the victim, to prove that the crime occurred and the crime was committed by the person who's accused of it. Now, that being said, there are a lot of developments in the law that makes the process of proving this significantly easier. So, for example, in the context of sexual harassment itself, based on the 2013 law, the burden is no longer proving the case of sexual harassment beyond reasonable doubt, but it is a much lesser threshold known as preponderance of probability, because it has been given a civil character. Now, there are practical challenges, of course, the foremost being that early reporting is not something that we see very often. So more often than not, the reporting of the incident itself is quite belated. A lot of the evidence may or may not exist. There may not be ways to break the deadlock of what the victim is saying and what the accuser is saying. But increasingly, the judicial precedents that have come out have resolved the deadlock by leaning in favor of the victim and not the accused. So keeping these things in mind, I do not think that in principle there are those kind of legal impediments that existed when, say, for example, the Mathura gang rape case happened. There have been a lot of changes on the language of the law itself.
Yes.
But I think where the difficulty lies is in terms of the infrastructure and the means of enforcing the law. There is still a lot of ignorance. There is still a lot of misconceptions about what transpires, what are the rights and privileges that the witnesses in the inquiry proceedings get. So, for example, the victim now has a right not to be in face-to-face contact with the person accused of the crime. This is by way of judgment of the Supreme Court, but this does not necessarily translate to a similar mechanism in the ICC inquiries, because they feel that these are principles applicable only to criminal proceedings and not to the proceedings before the ICC. So I think there is a need to create awareness. There's a need to create systems and better implement these laws. And more importantly, you need to create an atmosphere where reporting is easy, it is encouraged, and does not result in reprisals, because that is when early reporting happens. And the earlier the incident is reported, the greater the chances of some meaningful outcome being brought out through the inquiry proceedings.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Ashok. When we are speaking of the legal options for women, whether it is not, and I'm not restricting this to only sexual harassment, any sort, there could be harassment at workplace, there could be discrimination, disparity in income, even sudden termination. What are the legal options? Often this has happened, like I myself have faced when we were forced to get out. They make it so tough often for women that you just say, okay, let me just give it up. I would rather have my mental peace.
Right.
The legal recourse is very limited because you get labeled. You're told that if you approach the court, you will be labeled as a troublemaker, especially by the corporates. And two, the kind of money and time that is needed, that often women do not opt for it. And I'm not saying men don't face it, but when we see percentage wise, then it is the picture is a little different.
Absolutely. I think the harsh reality of our judicial system or the legal system is that delay is a factor. I wish I could tell you that once the case is initiated within 30 days, there will be an outcome, but that never happens. And though there have been some strides made in terms of, say, bringing out the Commercial Courts Act to ensure commercial matters get certain expedited disposal mechanisms, the same systems have not been extended to, say, ordinary cases of employees challenging the termination by the employer, right? And the other issue that I think is very relevant to the subject is, have we really evolved our Industrial Disputes Act? Because even today, when we think about our labor protection mechanisms, the concept of statutory protection is mostly afforded to the persons known as a workman, right? But employees who are earning plus salaries in a corporate setting may not necessarily enjoy the protection of the Industrial Disputes Act, which means challenging things like wrongful dismissal, having the benefit of a prerequisite of domestic inquiry proceedings before termination is undertaken. These are not really set in black and white. These are areas of gray in the realm of law, and that also means that challenging a wrongful termination because you've reported something becomes that much more difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. So I think there is a need to actually expand the conversation to beyond just laws dealing with equity in the workplace. I think we need to have larger conversations about the labor code, about the Industrial Disputes Act, about the standing orders, ensure that the scope and ambit of the protection granted expands, evolves, and catches up with the times. And I think as long as we don't do that, the problem statements that you have identified will continue to be pervasive, which in itself is a deterrent to early reporting.
Neeta,
yeah.
This is Smita here, and I have a question for Ashok, if you don't mind.
Yes, please. I'll throw it open to the speakers. Let's ask each other questions. So please go ahead.
Sure. So Ashok, as you're talking about law, the most important law which impacted women hiring was maternity benefit becoming from 3 months to 6 months. You won't believe the innumerable calls that I got from managers saying, Smita, now from 3 you all have increased it to 6, you all are making yourself unhireable. Okay, these are the statements I heard from these managers. And What is your take on it? Is there something that can be done differently to not pinch people so much? That's one. Second is, there was a discussion about period holiday. Okay, a law to have period holiday. So any input on that, Ashok, would be really helpful.
No, absolutely. I think, look, it remains a fact that how we understand the healthcare concerns of women is extremely immature in today's world, right? Even today, I mean, I was watching another documentary the other day about how when women report health concerns in the US, they're often told to ignore it and move on, right? And that's the same problem statement that we face even in the workplace, because a man's understanding of what transpires during a woman's periods is very different from what is actually happening with the lady and how she's perceiving the whole thing, right? And there are genuine healthcare problems, cramps, pains. So I think there is a requirement for us to holistically address the concept of period leave. And I think it is something that workplaces can look at, especially in the day and age of work from home. So it need not be a case where women have to be compelled to come to the workplace. So I think it's a conversation that can be had to ensure that this becomes a part of a policy initiative, where period leave is introduced as one of the many leaves available to people in the workplace. And principles of equity also mean that women can get that little bit of access to period which other men may not be able to get access to, right? So legally, there would be nothing wrong in introducing this concept. So I think the problem again, as I said, is that we haven't really evolved in how we are approaching all these, labor law related concerns, leaves, and even when it comes to the Maternity Benefits Act. I think one of the concerns that we had immediately red flagged as lawyers is that it did not really make a distinction between the big corporate houses to the small individual sole proprietorship concern. Because while a corporate house or a slightly more well-to-do business might be able to afford the 6-month maternity leave, in the workplace, can that individual entrepreneur who's running an agarbatti manufacturing outlet really do that? Right. So I think there is a need for a social security systems to evolve around this, so that all businesses can be supported to meaningfully implement this. It has to be a carrot and stick where you incentivize people who are actually making this effort, and at the same time crack down on those employers who are using this as an excuse not to hire women. But it certainly can't be a case where it's just a stick and not a carrot, and there's no incentive involved. So I think the laws are nice there, but a lot of times they don't really appreciate the nuances on the ground. So that would be my amateurish take on the subject. So yeah.
I would in fact urge Mahabanoo to and Ashok to have a discussion. This is one sector, the entertainment field, where the laws, when you speak of labor courts, you speak of industrial disputes acts, we have seen that there's lack of protection for certain categories, especially for spot boys, for the labor class in the entertainment field, and the disparities and protection where women are concerned. Mahabanoo and Ashok, I leave it open to you both now.
I feel that really the worst affected in the field of filmmaking or television are the spot boys and the light boys. You know, they work so hard and they are very often treated very badly. I'm ashamed to say by big stars, I've seen people being so rude, and it just makes my blood boil. Apart from the women, of course, I mean, but it does happen that the producer, the director, and the big stars literally treat them like slaves. You know, they feel that because they are in a power of position, they shouldn't be treated well. The lower ones shouldn't be, the lower, shouldn't say lower, the word is not right. The labor, yeah, the labor forces should not be treated equally. Another thing I felt when we were discussing about transgenders is that the government has done nothing to really empower these people, you know, to educate them so that they don't run from traffic light to traffic light. There are very many of them who are highly educated, who even represent us in the United Nations conferences. But there is no really radical road for them to educate themselves to see that they get a better life instead of what they are living. You know, it's very sad, but I always keep some money in my car because these people have to literally go home every night and give the money to the guru who is the head of the adda or whatever it is called. And if they are not given that, I've seen films when I was a judge at the film festival for the gay, LGBT community. And if they don't give a certain amount of money, they are whipped, they are not given food. And it's a terrible situation. And I feel that the government is really doing nothing but nothing for this class of people. And even in, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I feel even in films, they are used as a point of ridicule. They're not treated with respect. I mean, they are human beings after all.
Absolutely.
No matter what their sexual orientation is. Some of them manage to get out of the rut only because they have very supportive families.
Yeah.
But the others don't have that. And therefore, there must be a program for them. And I feel, Smita, your organization should work towards that, to educate their children. They don't have children, but whoever is, in that community, there should be senior classes, there should be educated people trying to educate this group of people.
So, ma'am, I just wanted to add to your thought process that what has happened, and I can speak from corporate world perspective, that corporate has awakened to this fact that we need to do something for this community. And they have now consciously kept quotas for hiring people from this community. Another step that we, as corporate, I see a lot of organizations or a lot of corporates taking a step to reskill them, because not everybody, unfortunately, especially from transgender community, get an opportunity to go to schools or get some skills, So they are trying to get them to reskill or rather skill up to join workforce. I was in a conversation with Amazon. In Amazon, there was a senior lady who herself was a transgender and who was hiring women from the community, who was hiring people from the community. So she also had a concern saying that for Amazon delivery, they started hiring people from the community. Unfortunately, it did not work well because they said that they make money more on the signals rather than taking money from Amazon. Okay, salaries from Amazon. So that was also a disconnect. So so there are deep-rooted problems. So it is both ways, pull and push.
None of the delivery people in Amazon make any kind of money. It's very sad. I'm sorry to say that, but it is one big, sham.
So there are pull and push which was happening. Okay, but whatever the point I wanted to make is that at least many corporates, especially corporates who want to give back, and considering CSR is a big part in various organizations now, they have awakened to the fact that they have to do something for this community. That's a good news. Now, how organizations like us can help them do that, because many of them do not have the directions, do not understand what needs to be done. So we are trying to support from that perspective. Yeah.
Pratibha and Smita, I have a question. When we're talking of LGBTQ community, transgenders, financial services, so investments, savings, and maybe, the offering of for them to invest, especially. How do you see is the financial environment? How do you see is the corporate, not just corporate, okay? This is not just corporate, but say the banks, the insurance companies. Are there enough opportunities? Because we're talking of inclusivity, we're talking of building ecosystems, then for them, are there opportunities?
So a question mark, while I'll let Pratibha respond to it. Axis Bank had recently come up with an initiative of having same-sex partner as nominee. Okay, where many banks are still thinking about it. They are not there yet to have nominee as the same-sex partner to be the nominee. So that's a big question mark. Again, getting them, to invest and all that, I'll let Pratibha respond because I don't have any clue on that.
See, unfortunately, it's not about inclusivity when it comes to financial, opportunities for them to invest. They're not discriminated against because they are LGBTQ or, the discrimination happens. Do you have enough money to make sense for me to give you the advice? There is a threshold. below which people are not servicing them. So you have your maids, your drivers, anybody, you know, any gender, anybody, if they're going to come with a very small corpus to invest, okay, and they obviously cannot, you know, they don't have the confidence to approach a proper professional. When they do, like somebody would give them advice only because they're working for somebody known to them. They don't have access to this you know, for their investments at all. Unfortunately, the people who really need it don't have access whatsoever. They have to make do by themselves. If you look at insurances, you know, I don't know how many people in this country must be earning less than 15,000-20,000, and it's a nightmare to get an insurance for somebody who has a 15,000 salary. They will be getting that money in cash. They're drivers, they're, you know, they're working, they're masseurs, whatever they are, they're working, they don't have proof that they have income. Okay, so it has a lot to do with your economic status rather than any other discriminate. I think paisa na bolta hai. So if you have money, it doesn't matter. You'll be totally included in it. But if you're not making sense to the business, it's very difficult. There's no social angle to it.
So that's the thing. In inclusivity, we don't have inclusivity for people of you know, of BPL, below poverty line. We don't have that inclusivity in finance sector. Like even if someone like me has, I mean, like my example also, I have approached for mutual funds, and there are those you know, those liquid mutual funds where they want clients with like lakhs or crores on an average, and they tell you, madam, आपके पास है क्या उतना पैसा नहीं ना, तो फिर SIP में डालो. So the point is, eventually they are on those daily saving, recurring bank, postal services. So we really see that the finance sector will really need to do something for small income category people, who are a majority in this country and are getting excluded.
So
I have,
you know, in our study groups, we come across, you know, we have these sessions where we talk about the differences we made to see, we make differences to people's life. You've upgraded your car from a Tata whatever to a BMW, that gives you some happiness. But if you've made a difference in making this guy buy a house for himself or educate his child, basic graduation gives you a different level of it. So every 6 months to 8 months, we spotlight somebody who's done some good work. Unfortunately, the number of us who are part of the group is very few. So even if each of us make only difference to 10 people, it's not going to make a substantial difference. It has to happen on a larger scale.
I have a question for Pratibha. May I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Pratibha, you know, don't you think that this is because there is a lack of social security for the people in India, like they have abroad? I mean, even the poorest of poor who's buying say a pack of biscuits, they are paying tax. All of us are paying tax. You know, every little item we buy or we, you know, it has a tax attached to it. So why is it that the government cannot give a social security assurance to every member of the country, to every citizen? And why has nobody worked towards that?
There's very conflicting views on that. You're true that there's no social security, but there's some states like Tamil Nadu, for example, started handing out stuff, and then there are articles which come out saying people have stopped working. So I mean, I completely with you. Even the very few social security schemes which has come in for this sector, they're not aware of it. They completely lack the confidence to go into the bank and ask, give me the Pradhan Mantri, you know, Suraksha Yojana, which is meant for them. They can't go and ask. They'll come and ask, madam, aap mere saath chaloge? And how many people are going to, you know, it's up to us, you know. Government, yes, it should be doing, but
I mean on a national level,
Right.
a national level, not Tamil Nadu, and not for political reasons. You know, if an election comes up and you're handing out these freebies, I don't mean for that. I mean on a national level, one program for social security, even the senior citizens. Everyone can't afford to have a good life once they've retired.
basic
A good
medical
life means a
insurance-
basic good life.
Yeah, I agree with you, but till the government does, I think there's one small thing is to educate ourselves on what are the little schemes which the government has come out, subsidized ones, insurances, medical insurances, retirement schemes, and to pass on the information further. I think that's a difference you can make right now.
Yeah, to the uneducated, you know, people who wouldn't know about these schemes, it's very important that someone makes them aware of this.
Yeah, true. I
Ashok,
have a question for Ashok. May I? Yeah. So I think that the estate laws for women are, very unfair. While Indian male passes away intestate, which means he doesn't have a will and he's passed away, his property will be given to his mother, his wife, and his children. It's not the same for the lady. If she's married, that doesn't matter if she's happily or unhappily married. Her property will go to the husband and to the children. And if there's no children, to the husband. If there's no husband, to the husband's family. What is the logic towards this, and what should we do to educate women on this?
Patriarchy is the logic, Pratibha.
I know you're not the lawmaker, but it's something which really perturbs me. You're on mute.
So I remember my senior telling me some very wise words when I started my career in the profession. He said, "Do not ever look for logic in the law." Right, and that's something that I constantly remind myself whenever situations like this present itself. See, there is the laws of inheritance in this country is still not the subject matter of a secular legal code. It's still driven by the personal, the laws of the relevant community. And what that has done is that there is a tremendous amount of lack of clarity in terms of how succession and inheritance operates. And not all the times, in fact, more often than not, they're not very equitable in terms of how it affects members of the vulnerable communities, right? Senior citizens, women, daughters. In fact, it was only very recently that the Supreme Court came back and said even the daughters have a right of inheritance to the ancestral family property. So, like every other laws, I think we have to look at meaningfully revamping the laws, even when it comes to inheritance in specific communities. And I'm a big advocate of a uniform civil code when it comes to at least the issue of inheritance. It's very, very important that we look at the actual economic considerations involved, identify who's vulnerable, who's not vulnerable. Let that be the criteria to determine how the estate is distributed, and not make it a very standardized process of how the estate gets divided equally among everybody, or how certain members are excluded. So there is a need to revamp it, and pending that, I think women in these kind of situations will have to fall back on other forms of legislation, like, for example, the Domestic Violence Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, where economic deprivation at the hands of somebody in the shared household is also considered a form of domestic violence for which you are entitled for a compensation. Section 125 of the CRPC being the right of maintenance. So there are other legislations that you can fall back on, but succession and inheritance, as you rightly pointed out, there is a lot of work to be done on that.
Thank you.
finally, a lot of things come back to you, Ashok, for questioning as to the laws, whether we were talking of the Industrial Disputes Act, the labor courts, and slowly we see, I mean, I have no grouse against the corporates, please pardon me, but with every corporate, with every sector getting corporatized, I'm sorry to say, they want to do away with any protection and, you know, rights of the workers, the employees. Anything to do with union means, oh my God, this is like, you know, just stay away. It is like outcast. And I still believe that the protection of the workers is eventually what is important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, I think there is we are a culture of extremes. When the day and era before 1991, we were on the other end of the socialism experiment. Post 1991, I think there is a strong push towards a more liberalized approach towards labor regulations. I think the sweet spot is somewhere in between. And what we have to understand is that institutions on both ends of the spectrum are not free of their share of problems. Even today, if you look at some of the patterns in how trade union elections are fought and how the grassroots dynamics work, there are a whole range of other social issues, caste, class,
Yes.
and a bunch of other gender. So there are, even the unions are not free of the same problems that we see in other aspects of the industry. So, which is why I think what typically happens in the realm of lawmaking is that we look at time as a constant. We don't look at time as a variable, right? So the law that was applicable for, say, 1990 to 2000 may not be really relevant for 2000 to 2010 because new ideas have come out, new problem statements are coming to consciousness. So I think what we need is a right balance between a fluid approach to policy making and a very rigid approach. Certain values are set in stone, but the way in which we achieve those values continues to evolve with the ask of the times. So I think that's where we are really struggling right now.
Thank you. I am going to open it to the audience. 5 questions. Huh? That's it, please. Not more. And I leave it open to the audience, to the the other participants who can speak to our speakers, ask them questions. 5, that's it. So I'm throwing it open. Okay. People will grab this opportunity. Hello, knock, knock.
May I, if there's nobody else, I have a question for Ashok and
Please.
probably the other panelists. Recently, I signed a contract with a certain company, and one of the issues, one of the conditions was that the company will not be responsible at all for any harm that the actor may suffer on the set. Now, I just imagine if a light falls on me or another actor or on anyone because of some malfunctioning, why is the company not responsible for that?
So,
I mean, I was shocked to see this, and I had a long discussion and almost felt I didn't want to do the project. But they said,
no, I mean, answering that question, I'm on the litigation side of things. So I routinely test these contracts in the court of law to see to what extent they're actually even tenable. And I can tell you that some of these clauses are not enforceable, right? So if there is negligent, yeah, they're not enforceable. And we have to remember that Indian Contract Act, which is one of the most enlightened piece of legislation that came out of this land, it is very, very particular about ensuring that any contract which restricts a right to legal remedy, in this case, for example, compensation for harm undertaken during the course of employment, remains unenforceable due to the operation of Section 27 of the Contract Act, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of times, people don't realize that just because they're signed on the dotted line doesn't mean that they're actually bound by everything there. So you can actually test these clauses and you'll be surprised to realize that a lot of these clauses are not even enforceable.
thank you.
Okay, this is for Smita and Pratibha. Can there be organization policies to help a woman employee with a financial planning?
So I'll take from HR perspective. Can there be a employee policy? It's an initiative. I will call it initiative rather than policy. And a lot of organizations are doing it, not only for women, but generally a lot of people falter in their financial planning. So as an employee engagement initiatives, many organizations engage with good financial planners like Pratibha. They invite them, okay, and they do sessions to make them understand what is important, what are basic things that they should be doing, right, and how they can help with. So a basic learning of finances and how do they go about it is done by organizations. I won't call it policies, I would call it initiatives. Pratibha, you may want to add.
Like meditation and yoga for mental peace.
Yeah.
Yes. These are good. And trust me, it's constantly now the employees market which has happened, especially in IT industry, we're struggling for talent. And to hold that talent, organizations are doing so many things to pamper them,
we have to
take care of them. Sometimes it's so extreme that I have to tell them, don't spoil the market, please.
So
I completely agree with Smita what she says, because yes, it is an initiative taken by the engagement team. And we do have multiple sessions by the corporates where they talk about finance for non-finance staff. And that is an initiative done internally.
So this is somehow this seems to be the time, Women's Day, and then there's lots of offers. Can you do an, financial well-being workshop? And very pleasantly surprised at the latest workshop I did, out of 170, it meant for Women's Day, open to everybody. 70% of the participants were men. The corporate even went ahead and paid for an individual consult for each of those employees. Obviously, they were clear that, there's no selling activity, but they did that, and it about 15% of the participants took advantage of that and came back for asking for customized solutions. There are corporates which also say any new employee comes in, they go through a induction. Along with that, they'll be taught financial planning. This has been happening for some time. So while it's not a policy like Smita said, it is something which people are very conscious about, and they keep coming back to you for year on year. Definitely during Women's Day, but even other times during tax times and for new employees who join in. And some of them really benefit hugely from this.
Yeah, I just want to add one point here very strongly for every person, every woman who's listening to this conversation. Very important, as Pratibha said, and I'm just reiterating what she said, is take charge of your finances, okay? If you want to create your next generation empowered, or if you want to feel empowered, please do that. And I'll tell you why, because I'm a very financially independent person, and I got this from my mother. My mother used to say, and Pratibha and I had this conversation earlier, my mother said very clearly to me that your income minus your savings is equal to your spendings. So first, whatever income you get, keep aside a bunch for your savings, and whatever remains, that is that much that you'll spend on yourself. And that is stuck to my brains as I was a teenager, and I am 40 plus now, and I have continued because my mother kind of ingrained this in my mind, right? So this is a very strong message that we want to give it to each one of you who's listening here.
Our mothers only taught us always keep aside from the investments. Okay, somebody has just, Ankita, okay, we have 2 questions. What are the top 3 that will help mitigate bias in companies' decision making? All of you all can give this answer, okay? Top 3 points, top 3 things that you all think in your sectors will help mitigate bias when decision making is done. And can you all shed more light on challenges for implementation of period holiday, whether it is a legal team, please mute, others please mute. Why is there resistance for period holiday? So it could be the theater, films, it could be corporate, it could be the finance sector. And why are the corporates not sensitive to period holiday? Oh, women tantrums, they say. So I throw it open to all of you.
May I say something? In theater, you cannot take any holiday, whether you have your period, whether you're pregnant, you're a report to work, the show has to go on.
Yes, same as with the media.
That is our, at the last minute, we cannot afford to give anybody a period holiday. So,
yeah, so very clearly it is loss of productivity for many people. They convert holiday into money or dollars, rupees, whatever. So organizations are very bothered or cost sensitive. But trust me, I've been running this company for the last 8 years, and 99% of my employees are women employees, right? Unless it is genuine, they won't take a holiday. And if they are sick and they come to work, there is zero productivity. So it's a strong message.
And especially if they're coughing or they are sneezing.
Yeah, anybody, right? Even men fall sick.
Yes, or anyone.
There is no point in having them. And trust me, you are not a woman, so you do not know what woman goes through, especially, initial days of, and especially when you are like between 20 to 30, it's difficult because your body is adjusting to something very, very new. So please trust them. Trust is a factor that is required. And I remember when I joined corporate way back in 1997, I had the senior leader, and when for the first time, I joined as a graduate trainee, and for the first time, I had my periods at work, and I was struggling to sit up. And he was a very senior guy. He came and approached me. That time, period word was a taboo. He came and told me, periods. I didn't know what to say to him. He said, go home, no problem. I said, you'll cut my half-day leave. He said, no, go. So I still remember that, right? I can't forget that. So can we be empathetic? It's just a matter of being empathetic. Work will happen. Next day, I would have done more effort to ensure my work is done, right? So please be sensitive, and please go ahead and apply it. There are like demonetization was pressed on us and we had to do it, right? Just go ahead and apply it. See the consequences of it, right? go ahead and do it is what I recommend to all the organizations.
Ashok, you were saying something.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
sorry, Pratibha.
From a lawyer's perspective, I think as an officer of the court, I don't have casual leave, I don't have sick leave, I don't have any of that, right? And in the organization, I think I come from a law firm where 5 out of the 6 lawyers are women. So I think the concept of period leave is something that even the women themselves don't have a consensus on. So what we do is we have a very flexible policy. So we let them decide, right? If they're up for coming to work on that particular day, then they have the option of coming and working. If they feel like they don't want to come to work that day, we don't ask questions. We understand that they don't take leave unnecessarily, and we just let it fly. I think as a small organization, we can afford to be flexible. And as I think Smita rightly pointed out, it's about trusting your colleagues to do the right thing, right? Sure. And I think as long as the trust is there, you can somehow manage.
Pratibha.
I worry that when such, the period leave, etc., comes in small organizations, which is what most of financial sectors is, will definitely discriminate against women, saying that if she doesn't come for 2 days in a month. Secondly, how many of us give period holidays to our maids, to our cooks? You cannot discriminate on economic basis, right? So they are also women. I don't think we're sensitive to the fact that, that they require the break. Yes, once in a while they come up and they tell you, but it's not like a spoken policy. Bimar ho mat aao.
I just have a question. Do they have a do they have a menstruation leave in the army and in the police force? I just want to know. I don't know. Maybe Ashok or maybe Pratibha can tell us.
We need to check that, because now that they are allowing women in the armed forces, maybe they need to even address this. It's a very valid and a very important question you have raised, Mahabanoo.
Having worked very closely with the police on quite a few training and capacity building programs, I can tell you that leave alone menstruation leave, I think their issues in terms of labor welfare is much more fundamental. Same working hours, getting a weekly off, having a salary that will help them live in the city where they're posted. So I think the getting access to a shelter if they're manning a particular post, right? I've actually seen in peak summer how policemen struggle because there's absolutely no shelter. So I think in terms of the evolution of labor laws and labor welfare for police officers, we are 100 years behind, and I think we have a lot of catching up to do.
Ankita has asked a question. What are the top 3 things that will mitigate bias in your sectors? One by one, please.
For me, I want to give key message, and I'm talking from a perspective of women. 2 things, okay? From women's perspective, take charge. Take charge of your own careers, of your own financials, of the way you grow. Okay, this is nobody's going to serve it on the platter. You have to take charge. Okay, that's one. Second message that I want to give to corporate is work on the mindset. Do not work on periphery. Do not work on the outside, but inside, how you think about it. And as I mentioned earlier, how do you think in the critical situation? Are you working on the mindset of every employee, right from top to the bottom, right? Are we working on the mindset to have an environment which is inclusive, of creating an ecosystem for all kind of human beings? So these are 2 key messages that I wanted to give here.
Mahabanoo?
Yeah, I want to tell women especially that when something goes wrong, please talk about it. Come out and talk. I've started a little group called the Empathy Group, where our tagline is share, support, and survive. Because if you don't, silence is equal to death. That's what I want to say.
Pratibha?
I think financial independence is non-negotiable. Everybody, whether it's, any woman who's financially independent, you'll see there's a lot less stress in her life and subjugation is very little. To how to get rid of these biases, you take charge, you make that difference, be the boss, own the money, and you will see that the next generation will automatically do it. Like Smita said, I also come from a family where both my mother and mother-in-law are the ultimate authority in terms of taking money decisions. For me, it comes naturally. Luckily, my mother-in-law also is, otherwise we'd have had marital problems because husband wouldn't have understood how this goes, So I think that's the only way to mitigate the bias.
Ashok?
So I think I can think of 2 things. One is with the lawyers in the organization, we always make the message very clear that they come first. So if there's any incident of misbehavior at the hands of a client, at the hands of anybody external, they're encouraged to push back, and we will support them, and we will never actually side with the client versus the lawyer. And the other way of doing it, I think whenever we do our build our policies for our clients in terms of gender equity, we always encourage them to try and see how it improves productivity, because that's the reality. Bias is stupid. So I think if that message can be sent across, and if organizations can help understand that a safe, healthy working atmosphere translates to productivity, I have also seen that their acceptance towards some of these initiatives is much more aggressive. So I think as long as we're able to kind of keep this message of employees first, and also keep the message of ensuring that lack of bias is seen as an aid to productivity, I think that's one way of addressing it.
Bias is stupid. Speak out, share, take hold of your lives, of your finances. Financial independence is non-negotiable. Work on the mindsets, and that includes even us. We are no different, because we perpetuate those mindsets. I think we've got some very diverse, very interesting, and very deep thought, all unified, that we need to be inclusive, we need to work towards our well-being. I thank each and every one of you, the speakers and the participants. This year, the Women's Day, they have come up with a message. Let's just do this before we say bye to each other. This is breaking barriers. So let's break barriers by Ashok. You're not an exception. Thank you. Let's take leave. Anyone? Thanks a lot, everybody. It was very insightful and extremely, I think it has helped everyone. Thank you, Seema, for participating in this. She's one of our participants who's also given us the site. I think it is very important, this session. I think everyone has got something to take back home. And I thank Ashok, Smita, Mahabanoo, Pratibha, and our participants. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.